We're going to start with Kansas. Kansas, obviously, the national champion going in, is tied for 5th in preseason polls with their conference mate Baylor. Kansas Jayhawks, I mean, what is there to say about this team? Really, the roster's a work in progress right now. But Bill Self is one of the best coaches in the game. They bring in some pretty decent 5-star recruits that are probably going to be starters right off the bat. Grady Dick, Ernest Uday. And then you bring in guys and return guys like Jalen Wilson, Kevin McCullough. This team is going to be right back in it. And there's a reason that they're preseason ranked, tied for 5th. It's hard to say that these aren't one of the front runners for the Big 12, a conference that is super deep, Steve.
I mean, 1 to 10, top to bottom, the Big 12 is the best conference in the nation. It doesn't necessarily, I'm not saying they have the best team, though you can certainly argue that the first 2 teams we talk about are Final Four possibilities, absolutely. I find it ironic when we talk about Kansas, because as excited as college football fans got about finally being able that the Kansas Jayhawks are relevant for the first time since, I don't know, Gale Sayers in the 60s. I'm sure they were good in between that. It just didn't seem that way. As excited as we were about that, secretly, I just laugh at tournament time and you get in these conversations about brackets. Everybody wants to trash Kansas. Oh, they're soft. Oh, they're not going to make it. And there were times in the late 80s, early 90s, even when when they were really, really good, they seemed to fall short of expectations. But they really haven't disappointed in a long, long time. So if people want to dismiss Kansas, okay. I hate to break it to you, you're going to be seeing them, at least in the Elite Eight for sure. So you might as well just get on board now and embrace it. I love McCullough. Smothering defender. I mean, he just you can't beat him off the ball. He's just terrific. He's an underrated shooter, and we talk about this a lot when we do the previews.
Mm-hmm.
Some players just make incremental improvements. He's the kind of guy that's going to make that kind of improvement. I think DeJuan Harris is probably going to get the most calls to start, alongside of him. Bill Self knows, and the great thing about Bill Self, he's not going to force a system onto the talent that he has. He can coach in just about any system. You want to run up and down, he can do it. You want to slow things down, play a more defensive game, which a lot of teams try to do against Kansas because they're just so uber talented all the time. He could adapt to that. So Kansas is built to play whatever game their opponents want them to play. So that's where you have to take Kansas seriously. A lot of the teams we're going to talk about today might seem more flashy, and we're not talking about Texas. Texas has flash, has oomph. I think that's why people are so high on them. But Kansas just gets the job done. And this roster, despite the turnover, this roster is going to get it done from day one to the end of the Big 12 conference tournament. And then when you get to the NCAAs, we'll see what happens.
McCullough, Wilson, and hell, even Clements seems like they're going to be a lot more capable than they were last year to bring more. My question is, which one will stand out to be the number one option? I think Wilson is probably that answer initially right off the bat if I had to give you an answer, but I think McCullough could be that guy. The coolest thing about Bill Self, I think one of the biggest things when you try to count out Kansas, in his 19 seasons, he has not had a record finishing any lower than 17th in 19 years. That is absolutely incredible for Bill Self. This Kansas team, don't sleep on them. We're going to figure out what kind of team they are right off the bat if they're a national championship contender when they take on Duke, the third game of the year in the State Farm Champions Classic. They're also going to face teams in December like Indiana, Oklahoma State, Seton Hall. We're going to see some pretty fun games out of Kansas. We should have a good idea by the end of the year what this team looks like. Obviously, when conference play happens, just like any other conference, but especially in the Big 12, anything can happen. I'm very excited for this Kansas team, but I will say I am not as confident in Kansas this year compared to other years. It's not because of them. It's because of the rest of the strength in this conference.
Conference.
There's a reason why that they are tied for 5th in their preseason rankings with another conference mate.